Penguin Random House Audio presents My Soul is Rested, the story of the Civil Rights Movement in the Deep South, by Howell Raines. Read for you by Aaron Goodson, Marni Penning, John Pirhalla, Deanna Prince, and Victor Warren. For Susan, Ben, and Jeff, whose love sustained me during the writing of this book, and for John Lewis, whose courage helped make possible the story it tells. A chronology of the Civil Rights Movement in the Deep South, 1955 to 1968. The Montgomery Bus Boycott, December 1st, 1955. Mrs. Rosa Parks is arrested for violating the bus segregation ordinance in Montgomery, Alabama. December 5, 1955. The Montgomery Bus Boycott begins, and Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., 26, is elected president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. December 21, 1956. Montgomery's buses are integrated, and the Montgomery Improvement Association calls off its boycott after 381 days. January 10th and 11th, 1957. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, is founded, with Dr. King as president. The student sit-ins. February 1st, 1960. 4 black students sit in at the Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, starting a wave of student protest that sweeps the Deep South. April 15th, 1960. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, is founded at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. October 19 through 27, 1960. Dr. King is jailed during a sit-in at Rich's department store in Atlanta and subsequently transferred to a maximum security prison. Democratic presidential nominee John F. Kennedy telephones Mrs. King to express his concern. The Freedom Rides. May 4th, 1961. The Freedom Riders, led by James Farmer of the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, leave Washington, D.C. by bus. May 14th, 1961. A white mob burns a Freedom Rider bus outside Anniston, Alabama. Riders aboard a second bus are beaten by Klansmen in Birmingham. May 20th, 1961. Freedom Riders are beaten at the Montgomery Terminal. Whites riot outside a church where Dr. King, Farmer, and the riders are meeting. May 21st, 1961. The Freedom Riders leave Montgomery under National Guard protection and are imprisoned immediately upon arriving in Jackson, Mississippi. October 1st, 1962. James Meredith becomes the first black man to attend class at the University of Mississippi. The Birmingham demonstrations. April 3rd, 1963. SCLC launches Project C for Confrontation to protest segregation of lunch counters and restrooms in downtown Birmingham. April 12, 1963. Dr. King arrested on Good Friday for defying a state court's injunction against protest marches. While confined over Easter weekend, he writes the Letter from Birmingham Jail. May 2nd through the 7th, 1963. SCLC organizes the Children's Crusade, recruiting elementary and high school students for its marches. Police Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor retaliates with police dogs, fire hoses, and mass arrests that fill the jails. May 10th, 1963. Dr. King and Reverend Fred L. Shuttlesworth announce that Birmingham's white leaders have agreed to a desegregation plan. That night, King's motel is bombed, and blacks riot until dawn. June 11th, 1963. Alabama Governor George Wallace stages his stand in the schoolhouse door in an unsuccessful effort to block integration of the University of Alabama. June 12, 1963. NAACP leader Medgar Evers is shot to death at his home in Jackson, Mississippi. September 15, 1963. 4 black children die in the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. Freedom Summer. June 1964. Freedom Summer begins as hundreds of volunteers arrive in Mississippi to work in the Mississippi Summer Project organized by SNCC, CORE, SCLC, and NAACP. July 2, 1964. President Lyndon B. Johnson signs the 1964 Civil Rights Act, outlawing segregation in public accommodations. August 4, 1964. After a 6-week search, the bodies of 3 missing Summer Project workers are found buried under an earthen dam near Philadelphia, Mississippi. December 10, 1964. Dr. King receives the Nobel Peace Prize. The Selma March. March 7, 1965. Bloody Sunday. Alabama troopers and Dallas County deputies beat and gas voting rights marchers in Selma. March 15, 1965. In his "We Shall Overcome" speech, President Johnson responds to the events in Selma by announcing that he is submitting a voting rights bill to Congress. March 21st through the 25th, 1965. Dr. King leads marchers from Selma to Montgomery. After the march, Mrs. Viola Liuzzo, a marcher from Detroit, is shot to death by night riders. August 6, 1965. President Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act. April 4, 1968. Dr. King is shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Introduction. This book had its beginning on a gray February day in 1974. From the window of the Atlanta Constitution's press room in the Georgia Capitol, I watched a chill rain drizzle down on the statue of Tom Watson, my region's failed populist hero. Almost a century earlier, Watson had dreamed of creating a Southern politics that did not pander to racial hatred. As it turned out, the dream was greater than the man, and he betrayed it. But I realized on that cold winter's end day in 1974 that the fulfillment of Tom Watson's dream was at hand. For a Southerner who had spent most of the previous decade as a reporter in Alabama and Georgia, the signs were too clear to be mistaken or ignored. A black mayor and a black congressman had won election in Atlanta, the spiritual capital of the Old South. In Tuscaloosa, a diminished George Wallace had crowned a black woman as the University of Alabama's homecoming queen. I had watched from a balcony in the rotunda of the Georgia Capitol as Governor Jimmy Carter hung a portrait of Martin Luther King, Jr. in the Capitol's Parthenon of great Georgians. These events spoke for themselves, but in the sacrifice and unfathomable courage that made such events possible, it seemed to me, on that day, lay a story that had not received the telling it deserved. And this story, I was convinced, would be best told by the people who had lived it. As it happened, my decision to spend my working life in the South had, by 1974, delivered me to just the right place to assemble the story of the Civil Rights Movement years in the Deep South. After knocking about with several Alabama newspapers, I was covering the Georgia Capitol as political editor of the Atlanta Constitution. Julian Bond, a leader of the Atlanta sit-in movement, and a founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, was in the House of Representatives chamber, down the hall from the press room where I sat. Within a few months, Hosea Williams, the firebrand orator who had led the marchers across the bridge at Selma, would join him there. A few
Sample complete. Ready to continue?